To all who come to this ragged place, welcome. And since you're here, why don't we start the show today? We've got Jon Christian Ashby, the indescribable photographer. I use the word indescribable because I believe that every shot that he does is different and would require multiple adjectives to attempt to describe what he's doing with his work. So instead, here, we have him on the show. He can talk for himself, and I think it was a great conversation. I had a great time having the conversation, and I actually hope for a round two. So I hope you feel the same way. I'm making this intro, though, because, he's recording from his house. So you got to know that from time to time, the sound might go up, down, the levels might change. You might hear some noises you weren't expecting to hear. Hey, look, sometimes the garbage needs to be taken out and trucks need to pass by, right? It's not just making art here. The world still revolves around. So try not to let any of that throw you and listen to what he has to say, because I think he actually has some really interesting points of view, not just on art, but on business and life in general. Again, if you want to check him out beforehand, Jon Christian Ashby, I think it's actually a good idea to see what his work is so that some of what he's talking about could be put into the context of his actual work. So check him out if you'd like to, and it makes things a little more immersive, a more interactive experience for use. So please feel free to do that. Also, his name's going to be on the screen if you're watching this on video. If you're listening, it's going to be in the show notes and in the descriptions. So you can go find him on Instagram, Jon Christian Ashby. Again, this is the Ragged World. You should know this already, but if you don't, this is an adult conversation. The topics, the imagery, all of the stuff that just assume everything is adult in nature, and your virgin ears may hear something you didn't expect, so be ready for that. Look, that's everything I need to tell you about this. Without further ado, Jon Christian Ashby, Ragged World, let's go. Great to have you here, Jon. Thanks so much for taking the time to do it. I'm a big fan. I was looking at your B-Sides account, which I had not looked at before, and it's
pretty new.
It's new? When did you start that?
Maybe like 6 months ago. Yeah, okay. I just found there was a lot of content because I typically take maybe one, tops two of my favorite shots from any particular set and share that. And I realized there's a lot of stuff that I'm actually fairly proud of that doesn't actually show up on my regular Instagram. You can usually find a lot of it on like my portfolio site, but less people go there. Most people are more about the social media. So I created that account to sort of show some of the other things that, may have been fallen to the wayside, but certainly are okay photos I like to share.
No doubt. Because when I went through it, I was thinking that you might be thinking of B-sides in terms of like the other side of the album kind of thing, or the other side of the cassette tape. Not just because of that, because I'm like, a lot of times people think of B-side as like, oh, this is the stuff I didn't want to show or whatnot. But a lot of times that's where the hidden gems are on the albums. Yep. And I was like, okay, that's got to be what this is, because these are great. And like I saw the Sentience, I was really impressed by that particular photo. It caught me for some reason or another. And like, what goes into making like there are so many. Every single one of your images to me has this quality of story, in my opinion. Like, I'm a writer, and I feel like it's not just like, you could say photography. But in your case, it's more of in the fine art element, in my opinion. Like,
I'd almost describe it as narrative, where it does tell a story. I mean, that's my aim. My bread and butter, as it were, is often just like, people who have regular contracts, performers, theatrical dancers, and stuff like that. And so they come in and I do more conventional type beauty shots, and certainly that's how I pay the rent. But I work with a lot of really creative people, so being able to develop character ideas, and they bring rough concepts, and we sort of mold them into some of the things you see on my portfolio, is a lot of fun. And I try and encourage them to dig a little deeper. If someone comes to me with, say, a common theme that I get requested, for example, would be like a mermaid shoot, which can get pretty cliche pretty fast if you're not careful. But I talk to them about what a mermaid means to them. Why is that the theme that's coming up? And then we sort of build story around that, around the legends of mermaids, because there's different stories about mermaids, and sirens and whatnot. and the symbolism behind that, and then really explore the different emotional associations with something like that. And that's just one, for example. Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so that really reminds me of a little bit closer to making film in a way, where you're
Yeah,
working
kind of.
with an actor. So it sounds like obviously you're not doing this completely alone, right? It sounds like you've got a team
No,
of people.
I mean,
Uh,
it's a collaborative effort. COVID, it's primarily been me and the model.
mm,
Normally, I also, I'll have a hair and makeup person, but there's a lot of collaboration. I couldn't do what I do if it wasn't for the creative expression of the people I work with as well. So I'm very fortunate in my clientele. But it's interesting you mentioned filmmaking because that is my background in
oh,
terms of what I went to school. I went to film school, and then I actually ended up working in broadcast television, which is kind of the other end of that spectrum. Not what I would call creative. It was broadcasting. It was news, and I didn't mind it. It was fun, but it didn't fulfill that need, that storytelling need I have. And I was always a big fan of just really evocative photography, and I felt like that's something I could definitely explore. So I kind of make films that are, 1, 2, or 3 frames long. Very a lot of the story is filled in by the audience and the viewer.
wow.
But it kind of appeals to me that people sometimes even insert their own stories to match what they're feeling in an image. So
Mm.
it really allows the viewer to participate in that way. So it's kind of cool.
No, I think that's really cool. Well, some of my background is writing comic books.
Oh yeah.
So essentially, that idea of taking the frame and saying, okay, what is this whole story? And let's break that down into 3 panels. Let's make sure that
Hmm.
we tell this amount of the story in 3 panels. And it makes a
Yeah.
sequential thing. I guess a little bit like storyboarding in film.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. I've seen some of your work too. It really comes across. It's good stuff.
Oh, so yeah. Wow. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. But wow. So like, what's? I guess it's because you mentioned that it's because you weren't getting to fulfill that narrative quality, and you shifted over from news. Was there a catalyst where you said, okay, well, this is the moment where it's time to shift over completely?
Yeah, I mean, I was laid off. So what happened was I'd been in
Perfect.
broadcasting. Yeah, right. I've been in the broadcast world for coming up close to 20 years. Like I was there for a while, and I was working in Calgary, and it's always a volatile industry. I'd managed to dodge layoffs by shifting around different departments in the building over the years. But I definitely lost my love for it some time ago. And I was doing photography on the side. What I was doing was basically shooting burlesque performers because my partner at the time was a burlesque performer, and they themselves are kind of a different sort of visual storyteller, and I wanted to sort of capture that. And so it was a lot of fun, and I realized I could make a little side money if I got good at this. So I did a lot of studying and honing of my photographic skills and my editing skills and whatnot. And as time went on, I found the demand kept going up and up. So my plan was eventually to go to part-time broadcasting and shift it to, a half and half thing. But before I could do that, the layoffs came around, and after 20 years, that's a pretty good severance. So they gave me a fat check and bankrolled my business, and I immediately fulfilled what was my long-term plan, which was to relocate back to the coast in Vancouver and move out here and open up a studio. And that's exactly what I did. And here we are a few years later, still going good. COVID hasn't managed to sink my business just yet. So I'm, I'm not getting rich by any means, but I'm not dying either. So it's been pretty good.
Wow, that's fantastic. Like, I guess that kind of leads me into thinking about the business side of things as well. I think a lot of artists have
Mm-hmm.
trouble in that regard. I, for one reason or another, don't like. It sounds like you had a practical sort of reason for doing. Like, you didn't just quit your job or something. It happened that
No.
it didn't work out for one reason or other. But you'd been with them for 20 years, and you said, okay, now I
Mm-hmm.
had the bankroll for this business, and I decided to go forward. Is there something in that you could probably tell other artists who are struggling a little bit with the business side of things?
The business side of it is definitely a necessary evil. You have to be able to manage your finances. There's no getting around that, especially in this day and age. And I certainly wouldn't be in the position I am right now if it wasn't for that layoff. I have to acknowledge that because I got this one-time lump sum of money, that was a big part of why I was able to do this. You need not only enough money to start your business, but you also need to float your business for those first couple of years where you're not going to be turning a profit. And so that will require saving on some people's part. And my original plan, of course, was to do part-time so that I had guaranteed income on one side, and then as I grew my business on the other side, and make a transition out of it that I expected would take a few years. With the safety net being that if the business didn't work out, I could fall back on my old career. It didn't become necessary, but in a way, I think being laid off also kind of was a good kick in the pants, as it were, because now I didn't have that safety net. It was do or die. So I very much had to become very cognizant of where the money was going, what's coming in at the end of the month and what's going out, and finding ways of monetizing my skills in a way that ensured that I could have my bills paid. And there were a couple of ways I did that primarily through contract work and stuff like that.
Okay. Yeah, I know that you've worked with quite a few publications as well.
A couple, yeah.
So, like, how does that come about? Do you search for them, or is it just a matter of networking with people that you happen to know, or what's the deal?
All the above, yeah. There are definitely a number of resources where you can go and submit. These days, there's a lot of pay-to-play type stuff going on, and definitely there's mixed feelings on that. The idea that we're creating art and yet we're having to pay print magazines to publish it. So generally, I don't do that very much, primarily because if I'm putting that money out there, I expect to see a return on that investment. And there's definitely costs that go in. Like if I'm publishing to a smaller magazine, the reason I'm doing that is almost entirely for advertisement purposes. I want to put it on my site and on my social feeds and show, these are some of the magazines, that I've been in. And of course, as the bigger the name of the magazines goes up, sometimes the cost of submission may go actually down or not around, but there's not a lot of money in it, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Last year, like when I was published in Playboy with a pictorial set that I did with one model, and I didn't make any money from Playboy. Like most of the expenses associated with it were offset, but the return on those expenses was considerable because of the reach of that publication, right? So I got a lot of people coming to me afterwards looking to book sessions. The trade-off being is they're looking to book a very specific type of session after they read that magazine. And that's not exactly my usual style that I'm known for. You need to be versatile, much like I suppose if you were a professional, graphic artist, you need to probably have not only your own style, but be able to meet your client's needs in whatever style that is. So I can do different styles of photography. And if you're going to survive as a business, you need to be a little flexible. I'm not saying that if you are a landscape photographer, you should also do weddings. I would say that's actually a bad idea. You shouldn't do something you don't like. I don't shoot weddings, for example. However, I would shoot engagement photos on the condition that the bride and groom are weirdos like me. Right? It has to sort of correlate. Otherwise, they're probably not even going to be particularly happy with what they get. Right? I could give them technically very high quality photos, but they're not interesting to me, and they're probably not going to be interesting to my clients. So, a lot of it is about developing your voice, knowing what you're good at, and then marketing to that, and make sure that's what you're driving towards. I've seen a lot of photographers lose their love for what they do because they just chase the money. You have to find a balance. You can't just, shun anyone who doesn't do anything that's perfectly in line with what you're doing. But at the same time, you need to be fairly strict about what you accept as well. I know that sounds contradictory, but there is a balance in there. If someone came to me and asked me to shoot their wedding, I'd say no. But if they tell me it's a goth wedding and they're doing it in a factory during a rave or something, then you might have my attention, right? A lot of it's more speaking to, is this appropriate to my style, to the kind of stuff I like to do? And then sort of keeping an open mind about that.
I get it. I mean, I absolutely get that. I love it too, because I mean, we're here on a ragged world. I call it ragged for that reason. I'm not interested in talking to people. Not that there's anything wrong. Like you said, it's totally fine if you love shooting weddings. It's totally fine if you love shooting landscapes, but that wasn't your thing. It's a reason why I have you here. And it's something I absolutely want to ask you is, so since there's an obvious through line here, if it's a goth wedding in an industrial factory, it's burlesque dancing, I see shibari in there sometimes. I think that's how I first noticed your work too, is I was like, oh, these shibari are amazingly interesting, a little bit different than what other people are doing. Getting off on a rant though, but what I want to know from you is, well, it's kind of what I do. That's sort of my thing. I'm very good at ranting. So it's a talent of mine. What is your perception of beauty? Like, what does the word beauty mean to you when you think about it? Because obviously you have some particular thoughts. You had also mentioned that the mermaid shoot could get cliche. Right. And so like, I think a lot of people wouldn't even understand what's a cliche mermaid shoot, but here we are. So what is beauty to you?
Beauty to me is seeing what's inside someone. And sometimes they wear it on the outside on a daily basis. And sometimes it's buried right down at the bottom. Sometimes they're even a little ashamed of it. But I like to explore what's inside someone. I did this shoot very recently that I just released. It's doing well, of this woman who has this spiky mask around her eyes and some jewelry around her face. And it's a very almost frightening photo. And, I'm pretty sure she's a self-professed Satanist, right? But she's also just a lovely person to hang out and work with. This was the first time we worked together, and even though the image is very visceral, it's very dark, it's very raw, but it shows me her. It shows me something that's in her, some kind of inner rage about the world that's around her. And showing that to the world, to me, is a sort of beauty. Beauty to me is what is inside of us that makes us who we are. And that doesn't necessarily mean things that are pretty. It can be the dark, it can be the gross, it can be the grotesque. And sometimes it is something very beautiful, physically beautiful, conventionally beautiful. Nothing wrong with that either. Sometimes it's a blend of the two. I have clients who are, very beautiful models, but they don't want to show that. They want to show the messiness inside their head in a metaphorical sort of way, in a graphical sort of way. And we can do that. We can explore the struggles they have. That's beautiful. Vulnerability is beautiful. Showing that we're all human, that we all have these similar struggles, some worse than others, that some of us, may be in marginalized groups, some of us may be in very privileged groups, but we all have, all this crap we have to deal with in our lives, and it shapes who we are, and in all sorts of different ways. So when I see inside someone, when they open themselves up to me and show a side of themselves that maybe they don't show the rest of the world, I find that really beautiful.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I think the image you're talking about, is that the Testament?
Yeah. Like there's more from that set coming. That just came out last week, but it's been really well received. So.
That's like a flurry of black and red. The thorn, a play on the crown of thorns over the eyes, spikes. Yeah, people have to see that. I particularly like that one because of that. Again, I want to even ask you about that specific one, because I'm like, what goes into a shot like that? You kind of just explained it to you. If a person is, I guess, okay, this makes me think of a lot of things, and I think that my thoughts are hitting each other. We're going down the rabbit hole, because it's like, if a person is somewhat ashamed, or maybe they're nervous about showing that side of themselves, I feel like that takes a little bit of leadership on your part to help them get that out of themselves. How do
Mhm.
you make somebody feel comfortable? How do you get them to that honest place when you're shooting?
That's a good question, and it's a process. Typically, when I'm going to work with someone, I'm not meeting them for the first time at the shoot. I do, I call it a consultation. That's the business word for it. But really, what it is they're coming to the studio. I'm going to make some tea. We're going to sit down, and we're just going to get to know each other a bit. And we start, of course, with the basis of what did you have in mind for this shoot? Because most of my projects, the concepts are actually coming from the people you see in the photos. And that's what I love about it. On occasion, I'll dream up my own, but a lot of the time they're coming to me and they're like, I want to do something like this. And right there is your starting point. Why? Why do you want to be this monster? Why do you want to, be in shadows wearing lingerie? What is it uh, that draws this idea? Why do you want to show this to the world? Right. And I may not blatantly just sit down and say, hey, why do you want to do that? Because that kind of puts them on the spot. It can make people uncomfortable. It's more of a process of conversation, going back and forth, learning about what their life is like and to know them a little bit. It's not necessarily an in-depth interview. I just really kind of need to know the kind of feelings that they want to put out there. And usually through the process of that conversation, they will tell me why. I have one model I work with on occasion. Her name's Andrea, and she's just wonderful to work with because she allows things like her mental health issues that she works with, and has to deal with. She really lets them out in very visual ways, and having that conversation with one another, learning about what that is like for her on a day-to-day basis, drives me in terms of, okay, let's talk about metaphors, let's talk about color, because clearly I'm a color nut, and talk about what sort of things will evoke the same feelings as you are experiencing. It takes someone who has borderline personality disorder. I did this one shot of her where she looks like she's nearly drowning in her own tears. And it's such a strong visceral shot, I think, because the viewer can appreciate that feeling. I think we've all been down at some point in our lives at very low points. And especially artists who very much often wear their hearts on their sleeves, right?
Yeah.
They see that and they relate. There's something there that they connect to. And when they see that the fear, the panic, the depression, and what it's like to be overwhelmed by your emotions, in the case of the photo, in a very physical, drowning way, it connects with people. And I got to that place simply by sitting down on the couch, having tea, and getting to know Andrea. And so with different models, they'll come in, I get to know them. And it varies from model to model. Some are very outward and expressive with their feelings, even the dark stuff. And others, it takes a while to get comfortable. And this is the benefit of shooting with someone more than once. When they come in and sign a contract where they're going to do 6 or 7 or 8 shoots with me over the course of a year, it becomes a story. And each one, I find, they become more and more open. They get more comfortable. And then when they do actually physically come and shoot, I don't set time limits generally. I mean, I do have a window because I know about how long it takes to shoot something, but I'm not going to rush. If we're going to do something that's going to be exploring those deep, dark feelings, for example, I'm not going to say you need to have it done in half an hour. I mean, that will totally destroy what we're trying to do. So we'll shoot until we get to where we need to be. And if I've done my work in the consultation leading up to it, it's usually a pretty smooth process. Some people take a while to open up, and other people they come right into it. Being flexible and being open and being, to a certain degree, empathetic to how people feel and what they're trying to put out there is really how I do what I'm able to do.
Wow. So I guess that's it. I guess there has been some sort of a journey for a lot of the people that you've worked with to get to the point of shooting with you in the first place. And in some way, you guys must have come together for a reason, I guess, if you want to put it that way.
Yeah.
And maybe you're finding that reason.
Yeah, I'm kind of lucky too, because over the course of my career over the last few years, I've got a pretty good reputation. I've got a nice studio space, which, I go to great efforts to make sure that it's a safe space, that people feel comfortable to express themselves however they want to here. They don't have to worry about outside interference and obviously being professional goes a long way to that. And because of that, your reputation spreads. And then people, when they come to you, are already by default more trusting and more open because that reputation's been earned. So it's become easier for me to, be able to dig deeper with people. They let their guard down a little more readily with me because over the years I've proven that this is a safe space in which you can do that. And, that's very, very important to me. That only comes, I think, with time. I don't think that's something you can expect right off the bat. If you're new to your career, you're going to have to earn that through reputation and through practice.
No doubt. And you're saying practicing professionalism. I mean, what does professionalism mean to you, or what's the how or the doing of professionalism to you?
Well, I mean, I remember a photographer I've learned from a lot of photographers over the years, but one that I studied a lot of business from is a well-known photographer in the United States named Sue Bryce. Her style is completely different from mine, but I do like her approach to how she runs her business. So that was really what I focused on when I was learning from her. And there's this one line she said when she was teaching a workshop that I was watching, and someone came up to her and said, a man, who wanted to take, photographs of women, and said, how do I avoid, the common perception of photographers as being kind of like a creep. And she just looked at him and said, well, don't be creepy, and I mean, that's just it. If people come to me and, for example, in terms of practical application, I've never asked a model to strip down or get naked. They volunteer that. If they want to do that, I will certainly provide them a safe space to do it. I won't ask them to do it. And so it's one of those things where people can set their own comfort level. I don't put any expectations on my models to do anything that they wouldn't be comfortable with. And I think establishing that right off the bat and having a reputation as a photographer who does that makes it so that if they do want to do that, they'll be more comfortable in asking. And then when you've shot with people for a while, obviously you establish a trust and a rapport, and people who want to go down, the route of, like you mentioned earlier, like say erotic type photography, they can do that and feel safe in doing that. There are a lot of lousy photographers, but most of them, their careers are not going to go in any positive direction long term. They're, and I don't really understand them, to be honest. I guess from a logical perspective, and I understand why some guys use photography as a means to meet women. I think it's just stupid. I don't understand that. And a lot of it is, sure, they're been driven by other motivations than just artistic expression. But for me, it's really about creating a space in which the model can artistically put themselves out in the world, and I can just be, the medium by which they do that.
Indeed. And so, and speaking to the erotic side of things, it seems to me that maybe you actually have to be more careful in that regard. And from what you're telling me, like, it has to be an open door if that's the case, and that's the direction the art goes in, then that's the direction it goes in. Am I reading that right?
Yeah. I mean, someone may come to me and say, I want to have, beautiful photos in this lingerie I bought. And I'll say, great. They're relying on me, on my knowledge of lighting and posing, to shoot them in a flattering way. In terms of what they're comfortable doing, I will basically ask them what they want to do, and then I will direct them based on that to get the best possible shot. So I mean, sensual photography, boudoir, and erotic photography is an area where it actually takes a lot of knowledge, not just the lighting. Everyone talks about, oh, you can make it light it so beautifully. That's true, but posing and expression go a lot to determining if it feels more. Is it just sensual and teasing? Is it playful? Is it raw? Is it literally seduction of the viewer? How some people look for something more lewd, right? And whatever it is inside you want to put out there, I'm fine with it. But providing a safe space and providing the studio as a haven where you can do whatever you want and you're going to get the photos of that. My job is simply to capture it in the most flattering way possible. That doesn't mean the most generic way possible. I use a lot of shadow and depth. Boudoir is often very high key, very bright, with white sheets and stuff like that. I don't do a lot of that. I can, but you're probably going to be happier if you went to another photographer who is specializing in that. If you come to me, your sensual shoots are going to be dramatic. There's going to be deep shadows. And I encourage people to match themselves up to the artist that reflects the style that they want to put out there. I have often said straight up that, you might be happier with another photographer in terms of doing the style of shoot you want to do. I'm more than happy to do it for you, and I appreciate your coming to me. But it's most important to me that they put out there what they want to put out there in an accurate way. And if someone else can do that better than me, I'm more than happy to send them over. But anyway, getting back to your question.
Please.
Yeah, it's
ramble as much as you like, man. This is what we do.
Yeah, it's one of those things where you provide your knowledge of light and posing and obviously the technical requirements of a photography so that they can do what they want, whatever that is. And in terms of my own personal boundaries, it doesn't come up much. It usually doesn't go the other way where, photographers are worried about the model being inappropriate. It actually has happened only on one or two occasions in my entire career, but it has, where it's just like, okay, but that goes both ways. I respect what you're doing. You respect what I'm doing, but it's so rare because people come for a photo shoot. They're there for a photo shoot, so that's never really been a huge concern. It's a mutual respect for what we're there to accomplish and what we're there to create.
That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. What I'm hearing too is that you seem to know pretty well what your style is, what you're trying to do artistically, and there are certain things that you tend to like to do on a fairly regular basis, or the way that you like to work. How did you get to a point where you knew, like, okay, look, is it a matter of I've done this for such a long time and I've done so many different things that I've now whittled it down to this is my area? You've just honed the target practice?
It's always evolving, but I really like where I'm at right now. And here's the thing, right? When I started out, I decided, I need to educate myself. And if I'm going to do this professionally, any photographer who wants to do this professionally has to be able to, differentiate themselves from other photographers. And in order to do that, you kind of need to have, I guess, for lack of a better word, just your own style. But that's pretty much impossible when you start out because you're learning from other people. So I started taking courses. And one of the first people I started to learn from is a well-known artist down in the United States by the name of Brooke Shaden. Brooke is a fine art photographer. Her business model is entirely different. Most of her stuff is self-portraiture, which she sells as art pieces. But I really liked her style. Very whimsical. It actually has a very dark, macabre side to it, which is funny because she's just the most lovely, cheerful person you've ever met. And when I learned from her, of course, what I found was a lot of my images were looking like hers. Stands to reason. She's teaching you her techniques, her mindset when she's doing photos. Of course, you're going to see a lot of overlap. And so it would look derivative, but then I then take on more mentors. I look at other photographers and I start to, study them and learn their techniques. There's a lot of online courses from different well-known photographers. I've spent ridiculous sums of cash just paying for online courses from photographers I really look up to. And thanks to this day and age, it's very easy to get in contact with these photographers and one-on-one with them, and learn from them directly, in addition to the courses they provide. And the more influences you add into sort of your sphere, the more unique your own look will become, because now you're taking a little from there and a little from there and a little from there. And then you start incorporating your own ideas that no one's really come up with. You're like, well, what if I did this using this technique and this using this technique? And suddenly it becomes its own thing. And more, I'll find some new photographer and I'll just get obsessed for a little while. I'm like, wow, this is so cool. And if they're offering some kind of educational thing, which is a major revenue stream for professional photographers, is teaching other photographers, I'll definitely capitalize on that. I love supporting other photographers who teach. And if not, I'll just study their work. Why is it so strong? Why is it so visceral? One of my favorite photographers in the whole world is a German photographer named Stefan Gasel. And I hope I'm saying his name right. I've only ever seen it in print. But when you look at that one I did recently with the mask and her screaming into the air, is very much that look. Extremely raw, extremely visceral. And when interviewed, he said in German, but translated, I photograph my nightmares, and if you look at his imagery, that really makes sense. A lot of his stuff, it's not necessarily frightening. It's just weird and raw. And there's a lot of primal emotion behind it. And the way he likes it with the stark overhead lighting is something that, you can see featured in some of my work. So he's a strong influence on me. But I don't want to replicate his work. So I draw on the techniques I've learned over the years. And now what you see is Jon Christian Ashby. And I think this is a journey that most artists go through, whether it's drawing or painting or photography or what have you. You're going to, of course, start with the people who influence you, and then you will eventually find your own voice. And that's what it's been for me. And I imagine that's probably what it's like for other up-and-coming photographers as well.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And that makes me think about artists, photographers in general. I've found for myself, one thing I noticed as a writer is having the ability to draw on a few different kinds of fuel. I mentioned this to people a lot, and I wonder what you think about it. Is I feel like artists are sort of a hybrid vehicle. You might have, diesel fuel, electric, gasoline, whatever, and that could be your internal emotions. Essentially, maybe you have a bunch of sadness inside, or maybe you have anger, or maybe you have a bunch of happiness that you want to show.
Yep.
And how do you feel about that? Like, what kind of fuels do you feel you run on? And what have you seen over your time? Has that been accurate or to that sort of effect?
Oh, I'm a hybrid engine. I look at that and I'm like, most days, especially when I was starting out, it was just my love of beauty. And that often translates, of course, to beautiful female models looking gorgeous. And I do like that, being cisgendered straight guy, of course.
You're a human person.
Exactly. But I don't want to look at it as hey, this is something I'm into. I just wanted to capture it as it was and say, this is what I see. And I want to put it out. And, because beauty is something I think should be shared. It's one of my goals, is to just share beauty with the world. And then as I grew as an artist, I realized, of course, just, visually pleasing things are lovely, but they don't always tell a complete story. They only tell one type of story. And I don't think anyone who tells stories for a living wants to tell the same story over and over. So that's when I switch to other things and think about the darker stuff that's inside. And my fuel, this is kind of funny as a metaphor, because I'm really kind of pulling fuel from other people. Like when my models come to me, I'm finding out what fuels them, and then I'm using that as the fuel source, So if someone's running on that, really angry, diesel, then I'm going to take that and pipe it into the final product. And that's what you're going to see. If someone comes to me and it's using, beautiful green electric energy, then that's what you're going to see in it. And that, I think, is something unique to photography that's collaborative, i.e. photography with other humans. You're going to have a mix of your fuel and theirs, and then whatever comes out will be what it is.
I like with other humans. It sounds like, lizard person. No.
Yeah.
No. I got that. No, that's really interesting. Of course, it would make sense. In a way, it seems like you're somewhat of a conduit for these other artists as well to sort of channel through, and then you add what is essentially your own to it, which is really interesting to me.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah, that's kind of how I approach it.
Wow, that's interesting too. And I'm wondering, I see you said there's a lot of burlesque, and I've noticed that you started in that genre. I don't know too much about it, but when I do look, I do see that there's a few burlesque performers, and what I noticed with that was it seems to have a play of the erotic, the maybe classic entertainment style of a thing, almost circus entertainment, and somewhat of humor all mixed into it.
Yep.
Right? And
burlesque itself, burlesque, the word to burl is basically to almost in a way poke fun at. It was a way of, showing it's political satire a lot of the time, or satire of the world as it is. And they do it through dance by pushing the limits of what was, politically and socially acceptable at that time. And a lot of burlesque has strong social messaging behind it. And I love that because the same is true of photography if you wish it to be. So when people come to me and they have some very amusing idea, but one that really kind of pokes fun at something, that's good stuff. Like, it's a lot of fun to do that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think I don't know if that was necessarily on the funny side or not, but I really like that it's a UV light session where it's Valentine's Day, and I think it's Chelsea the Pale maybe that you were working with.
That's right.
And you had the arts. I mean, I guess, was she painted in that, or?
She was painted. Yeah, that wasn't Photoshop. One of the makeup artists I work with, her name's Jennifer Little. She's extremely talented. She recently was competing at the body painting competition, like the world championship. I'm not sure what it would be called. I'm not my scene directly, but she placed 6th in the world. Whoa. And so, just a fantastic talent. And I've been working with Jennifer over the last 6 months or so, just doing a number of different projects. And she wanted to do something for Valentine's Day. So, we approached Chelsea to model, and then she did all that body paint. But a lot of it was just that whole vibe of the anti-Valentine of, screw this. Not everyone wants to sign into the love is beautiful, and I hope you find your perfect partner and all that, which I think these days most people realize can be a very BS sort of perspective. It's like there's obviously nothing wrong with being your own person. In fact, I found it interesting this year for Valentine's. I usually get a little rush of people wanting to do Valentine's related shoots, and the majority of them were anti-Valentines. It was just, I mean, to each their own. I have no objections to the holidays one way or the other, but it's like, if that's what you want to put out there, that's what we're going to put out there. So, joining talents with a really, really talented makeup artist and a really, really talented model, you're just going to get cool, fun results either way.
That's fantastic. I love the shoot. And it struck me. I guess that's why I brought it up. But also, I wonder how that is. Maybe I don't know if you have an answer to this or not, but it's what comes up for me is, do you, some people of course are going to lean towards that, and like we're talking about Valentine's Day, lean towards that anti-Valentine's Day thing, like, okay, I'm totally rejecting this thing that's being
Hmm.
pushed on me. And then there's a bunch of people on the other side who are like, I'm totally accepting this thing that's being pushed onto me. What do you think makes a person, and I feel like maybe you're somewhat, I'm not going to put you in a box here, but somewhat in the category of pushing, maybe pushing away what has been sort of constantly pushed in your face, whether it be through media or other platforms. What do you think makes a person? Maybe you could speak to yourself. Turn in that direction. I'm that kind of person as well. So I certainly understand. Every time it's like, okay, you should do this, or this is something. They're not even saying this is something you should like. It's just there, and it sort of feels that way. This is something you should like, and maybe I don't know. Maybe I want to just ask a question about it, and we seem to not be allowed to. What do you think pushes people into that other direction?
I feel like I'm the Switzerland of something like Valentine's Day. Like, it's funny because I have no strong feelings for or against it, but like you said, I'm a conduit for other people's feelings. So if they're against, then, screw Valentine's Day. And if they're for it, I'm like, oh, this is gonna be a beautiful, lovey shoot. I'm flexible. But I think, I guess for me, something like contemporary things in the media, what's considered conventionally beautiful, stuff like that. Um, I understand where it's coming from, but I don't really I try at least not to allow myself to be pushed in either direction. I just roll with what is. I understand that Valentine's Day is a highly commercialized, uh, you know, thing that was more or less developed for the purpose of making money.
Hmm.
At the same time, I mean, there's nothing wrong with celebrating romantic, passionate love. That it's a
Yeah.
beautiful thing as well. I'm very much to each their own in my approach to most things. Um, so I don't know if it's even much of an answer because it's just like I just don't really care that much, to be honest. I mean, I was recently married, like just back in November.
Whoa!
So
Congratulations.
I'm still in. Thank you. Yeah, I'm still in that lovely honeymoon stage. But we didn't play it up like "Bring Me Roses and Chocolate." My wife doesn't care for that. Well, maybe the chocolate, but I don't need a special day, right?
Hmm.
It's one of those things where it's like if I feel like expressing my love for my partner, I do that whenever. And for me, that's not just a honeymoon phase thing. Certainly, it's probably a little more prevalent right now. But at the same time, even in previous relationships, if I'm feeling something, I'll just let them know. And if I don't, I usually have a reason for it, and I will eventually let them know. But for the most part, I feel like just put yourself out there. You don't need Christmas to tell your family you love them if you love them. And if you are on the outs with your family and that's not important to you, then just live your life. You don't have to necessarily use Christmas as a way of saying screw my family. But a lot of people do. I kind of walk the middle road on that sort of stuff, I think.
Man, I'm so happy to hear that answer. Actually, it's in a way a breath of fresh air, and it makes me think about just how there is generally at least a dichotomy, but oftentimes more than that. There's like two extremes and everything in between, and it does feel to me like a lot of times people seem to have to choose camps or something to that
Hmm.
effect, and like, oh, I'm about this, and it's like you're probably more than just about that one particular way of thinking or being. So, I
Hmm.
mean, did you have to find that road, or have you always been somebody who's able to kind of be in the middle of two extremes, or
I've
on
always
every
felt that,
extreme?
yeah, yeah. I think I've always been kind of like that. I don't know why, but even from an early age, I'm the person who can listen to every side of an argument pretty objectively, dismiss things that are crap, like for sure. But I mean, this extends to all things, especially right now when it comes to a very divided world when it comes to all sorts of issues.
Hmm.
Where I will give anyone the time to sort of give me their side, of whatever it is that they believe in. And I will, as objectively as possible, listen and empathize, and whether that's, how do you feel about a holiday? How do you feel about, the Ottawa protests? How do you feel about, all the stuff going on in the world right now? How did you feel about, the Trump presidency? It goes on and on. It disseminates. And we're in a sort of a society right now with social media and whatnot, where you really are pushed into here or here. And this, and this side may say, if you're in the middle, that means you're with them. They push you to go to one side or the other. That's what you have to be able to resist, I think. I think you need to be able to make up your own mind without feeling pressured from either side. You need to be able to objectively look at the information you get and think about it, talk about it, and then form your own, decisions about what you want to express, believe in, what have you, how you want to be in the world, based on objective observation, not pressure. And there is so much pressure right now. It's crazy how much pressure there is. And that kind of folds back into the way I sort of kind of be a third party when I'm doing photography for people, where, they come in with something, say a Satanist comes in and wants to do a hardcore image and I publish it. Well, I know a lot of Christian people who probably would be rather off put by that, but I'm not going to feel pressure from them to not say publish work that I think is important, nor am I a Satanist. So, it's one of those things where, I'm going to put it out there and say, this is somebody's truth. It doesn't need to be yours. It doesn't need to be something you even like. In fact, I would argue that if everyone likes your photo is probably boring, but I want people to be at least honest and be vulnerable and be willing to have a conversation. And sometimes it's a political conversation, and sometimes it's just a photograph.
Oh, no doubt. Wow. Yeah. Being honest. I mean, isn't that sometimes the difficult, somehow doing the most simple, being the most honest, being vulnerable? I mean, isn't that often the most difficult thing to do in a way? How do you even get to that? It doesn't seem like it's hard for you. You're like, nah.
I could ask you one quick question. Sorry to interject.
Yeah, sure.
Here.
No, please go right ahead.
Is it possible to pause just for 30 seconds?
Yeah, we can. No problem.
Yeah, no problem. I just see my wife in the corner of my eye trying to get my attention. I just want to see if there's.
And too, I was about to ask you how much time you had too, because we could ramble forever. So okay, please go right ahead. Go right ahead.
I was just clapping.
Oh, you were just clapping?
Yeah, because what you said was really nice.
Oh, okay. She was just giving me applause.
Omedetou gozaimasu. Thank you so much.
All right. Sorry. Thank you. Sorry.
No, man. Oh, it's not a problem. Really, I mean, that's it. Ragged world is essentially ragged. Another thing I think about when I think of the word is reality, right? The reason I thought of the term ragged, I don't know if you've ever been. Well, I know that you at some point you did like karate. I think when way back in the day. But you've probably seen a sensei that's had a black belt, and they've been wearing that thing for like 10 years, and it starts to become a bit tattered and starts to turn a bit white. It's frayed on the edges, and
there's a reason for that.
And there's a reason. It's their discipline, their constant training, their loyalty to the art in that regard, and 100 other reasons. And that's kind of what I think about with ragged when I put it there. So I kind of definitely what you're saying has some relevance in that regard to what I'm talking about. So I'm kind of throwing that on you.
Yeah, no, I like that too. It's funny you mentioned that in particular too, because I mean, some people have expressed that when it comes to say a belt in the martial art, there's a symbolism of innocence to that. When we start, you're a white belt, completely innocent, right? And your belts get darker and darker until you become black. And then as you wear that black belt over the years, it gets worn down and slowly returns to white. You slowly return to innocence. You get that knowledge. And then, as time goes on, you use that knowledge to grow as a person. I mean, you're using it to grow as a person the entire time, but your growth is very different once you get to what you would consider an expert level, and you're moving towards more like a master level where, you have knowledge, and then you gain wisdom to go with that.
Yeah.
So I always found that it's a little romanticized, but I like it.
There's nothing wrong with romanticizing things. I was thinking about what you said earlier. I've been with my wife for 17 years. I've had the whole true love scenario, and I totally believe in it. I haven't had any problems with that whatsoever. But I'm not going to tell everybody else that that's the way that it has to go, for sure. But
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, but indeed, indeed, that returning into an innocence point. I guess I think about that in terms of what would I call it? Being you have like when you're a beginner, you have an incompetent sort of situation. You're incompetent. You become somewhat more consciously competent as you go forward, and then getting that white belt back is sort of keeping that beginner's mind and becoming unconsciously competent. Like you just are competent.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, all the stages of learning. Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. Wow, well, very cool. So,
very cool.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to keep you forever.
Okay, no worries.
But
yeah, if there's any last wrap-up questions you got, let me know.
Well, yeah, I guess one of the things that actually strikes me, I don't know if this is a long question or not, but look, apparently we're adults, and
really? Don't tell me that. I'm in denial now. I'm in my mid-40s now. I guess I have to come to terms with it.
Yeah, maybe. But I do wonder about that. This is another one of those things where I do think there's an extreme idea that you're supposed to not like being older and that being younger is the better thing. And although I don't know that I agree with this. I don't know that I follow that.
I don't at all.
Yeah, I haven't seen that to be accurate, and I'm curious of what you think being. What is it to be an adult? What is it you mentioned growing? What is it to grow? What is it to mature? And how is that positive? Usually we think about adult as being, well, I'm more serious and angry and bitter about things, and I don't really agree with that.
Kind of a sad outlook, really. I mean, adult really is actually kind of a vague term. I think when we say, "Are you an adult?" is at the most basic level saying, are you self-sufficient? Do you have your life together enough where you can take care of yourself, pay your bills, and maybe have a nice balance of what you do in your life? That's the most rudimentary definition. But as I've gotten older, I think back to when I was a kid and I looked at adults, we all looked up to them like they were these infallible things because they were, wise and they knew about the world. And then as we grew up, we realized, yeah, they were actually just old kids, and so are we, I think for some people, adulthood means letting go of a lot of their childhood things, which I think is kind of a bummer, because play and creativity and all those things are very important, healthy, normal things for most adults. More important for some than for others, and that's fine. But I think letting go of that is a way of you're letting go of something that is intrinsically part of yourself. And that's kind of a bummer. So I guess, I know I'm an adult in the strictest definition of the word, but I never felt like there was some point where I said, okay, today I am an adult. I wasn't yesterday. Growth is ongoing. We'll be growing and changing, if not physically, then at least mentally until our last day. Because we're always getting new experiences, shaping our existence and our minds and everything, and teaching us different ways that we can be in the world, hopefully for the better. And so as long as that process is still going on, then you're probably doing okay. Some people may go what others would consider a negative direction, and they will still call it growth. But everyone's got their own path to walk. And so if we were all following the conventional, well, you're supposed to do A, B, C, D, that's going and becoming an adult and living your life, we'd be in a pretty boring world. But fortunately, as people, we don't do that. We all have our unique personalities and our unique paths, and that is part of what makes the world beautiful That's part of why I like to show the beauty of people, because everyone's growing and learning and becoming who they are in different ways. And in a way, documenting that allows us to connect to one another, even if it's just for looking at a photo and being like, I get that. I get what that person feels like. I felt like that. I feel like that now, or maybe I felt like that 10 years ago and I pushed through, and just enough to know that other people have lives just as complex and varied with stories like our own. And we forget about this. We look at people in a very two-dimensional way, characters in our narrative, in our story. It makes sense. That's a normal human thing to do. But every now and then it's nice to see past that and realize that every single person out there in the world has all these stories, just as many as you do, if not more, different struggles, different successes and things. And when we appreciate that, I think it gives us an opportunity to be a lot more empathetic and understanding of people, especially those who maybe don't hold the same worldviews as we do. That opens the door to communication. And if you do that with a photo or a conversation or a painting or a comic, those are all very valid ways of expressing that.
Wow, that's beautiful, man. I mean, thank you for that.
Thanks.
Really, no, that's really true. I guess we do forget that everybody else is the hero of their story, or maybe that they feel they're the villain. But
yeah,
one way or the other, they walk through it and they've experienced every other thing that we've maybe experienced or something different. We need them out there experiencing those things that we are not experiencing, probably. As opposed to just judging them in that whatever I like the fact that you mentioned two-dimensional, like these two-dimensional clips of people, and then we throw our opinion at it as if it's somehow valid, even though it's just this major reductionist way of looking at things. So I very much appreciate what you just said. I mean, I was gonna ask you other questions, but I don't know. That might be the most beautiful place to end that in a way, just because what you said was so poignant. I felt. I mean,
I appreciate that. I hope it reaches people. That's the main thing. I want people to be able to connect with each other. I do it by giving them my particular medium as a way of doing that, which is open to a lot of interpretation. But I think if people have something to say, whether it's visually or just with words or whatnot, say it. And a lot of people are, but say it with an open mind and with respect for the person you're saying it to. Don't pressure them. Speak your piece, let them speak theirs, be open to what they have to say. And even if you don't come to a consensus, even if you don't agree, you can still have mutual respect. And respect is something that's sorely lacking right now.
I agree with you very much on that. I mean, because we don't have to agree. I think that's
we won't.
Really
that's
important.
Unrealistic.
How could we? People are different, and different is okay. It doesn't mean wrong.
Yeah.
It means different. I found that like with Japan, that was a thing. I've been to Japan a few times, and that helps me a lot, because what they do out there is different, not necessarily wrong. Like, they don't have street names. The streets aren't anything. They're considered the space between buildings, right? So we don't do that here, but they do that there. Is it wrong? I mean, it seems to be working for them. And that's maybe a silly reductionist example of it, but I do feel that that's true.
Yeah, no, that's just it, right? People have different ways of looking at things and different ways of doing things. I suppose on that note, I mean, just to be a counterpoint to my own argument, I mean, there are definitely people who are incorrect about things and are going to adamantly uphold those incorrect worldviews, or because they simply don't understand. But that doesn't mean we can't be empathetic and compassionate towards those people. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're bad people just because perhaps they have a worldview that is flawed. You don't necessarily have to pity them. I don't think some people might look down on someone like that. But if we're ever going to find the peace that we all want in the world, the resolutions and solutions to the problems that we have, it starts with communication.
Oh, that's for sure. I mean, of course, things can be factually incorrect at some point, right? That is absolutely the case a lot of the time. But how? I mean, like you said, we can definitely play devil's advocate to almost anything. You can make an argument for almost anything, and there are a lot of reasons why we might be getting fed one story or another story, and you can buy into those stories sometimes, rather than looking at it and saying, does this really work for me? Does it actually work for the wider world? I think one of the things you said there, we don't have to pity them, but we don't have to agree. All of this to me sounds a little bit like not having simplistic thinking about these particular things, not trying to find this one way to solve it. Like, we've got a hammer, where are the nails kind of thing.
Right.
It looks to me
exactly.
like... I'm sorry, please.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, like, it's nuanced, you know.
Yeah, you'd probably have to apply many different, like, you don't just shoot in black and white, I notice. So probably you use quite a few different colors, and your colors tell you a lot of things. You don't just have red in there. You might have some other things.
It's a palette, and each one communicates something different. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Well, look, I'm not going to keep you anymore. I know you probably have other things to do other than chatting with me about philosophizing on the world. And whatnot.
No, it's been good. We went from photography to deep thoughts here. It's a lot of fun. No, but I really appreciate chatting. It's been good.
No, it has been good, man. I appreciate you coming on, really, really a lot. And I do appreciate your work. Probably a lot of people say that kind of thing, but I would not have asked you to do this if I didn't actually like what you were doing. Like, that's just...
I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no, and it is, I could see it. Really, I love that. I was like, okay, these are stories. These are movies. This whole shot it's just one shot. He's managed to capture it. There's a story being told. Maybe I'm adding my interpretation of the story to it, but I can see the characters. I can see the story. There's something happening here. It's not just the image. And that to me was what set you apart. I do hope
you add your interpretation. Yeah. I hope when you look at it, you see what's important to you and how you interpret it, because that's what it's there for.
Oh, fantastic.
And I encourage anyone else who goes on and looks at my stuff, I don't need you to adhere strictly to what I was thinking about. Tell me what it means to you, right?
Wow. Oh, all right. So I hope that people take some of these messages that you said, or they hear them and see them, and take them for what they are, and enjoy some of the work that you do in the future. I can't wait to see what you got coming, man. I'm excited about it, and I really, again, thank you so much. I don't want to ramble and just say thanks and blow smoke up your ass. But
no, it's all good. I don't want a little smoke up the ass now and then. No, I appreciate it. It's really cool. It's been good talking to you, and thanks for inviting me to take part in this. It's great.
All right. Thanks so much. Take care.